Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm Larry Davis, and this is The Growth State of Mind. And today, I'm having a conversation with Dr. Jeannelle, and we're going to talk about mental health, and we're also going to talk about intimacy. Yeah. So let me introduce you to my guest, Dr. Jeannelle. Dr. Jeannelle is a licensed family therapist specializing in marriage counseling and Black intimacy. Her new book explores obstacles and solutions for couples. Her new book is called Intimacy, Mastering Black Intimacy for the Relationship You've Always Wanted. And it's a practical guide as well as a guide for modern couples to develop stronger relationships and thoughtful investigation into the complex history of Black intimacy in America. Man, this is such an important topic that I really wanted Jeannelle to come on the show and talk about this. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Jeannelle. Hey, Dr. Jeannelle, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you for having me.
Yes. I'm excited to get into this topic. Just mental health and just in general. I've done a couple of shows with mental health experts, and I just love talking about it because we don't talk about it enough. And
Mhm.
I guess I've never heard mental health and intimacy kind of mentioned in the same sentence. And so this is new, and
Mhm.
this is a new topic for me, and I'm excited to see how those two things correlate because I never made that correlation. So I'm so excited to talk about it.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons why I decided to do this research and to put the book together. And I think it's important, first of all, to really define what mental illness is and what mental wellness is, because without that, then we just kind of throw them all in the same pot and they don't truly go in the same pot. So when we think about mental illness, we really need to be thinking in terms of medical conditions that really are disruptive to the way we think or our mood or our feelings or our daily functioning, our ability to even relate to others. There's the relationship part, right? And those conditions are generally speaking diagnosed by a medical professional like myself, or even physicians, because from time to time, they will take the opportunity to ask the appropriate questions. Now, mental wellness, right, being able to function in your best interest. And the way that mental health, in and of itself, wellness or illness, impacts relationships is through the behaviors that are exhibited whenever someone is in a state of anxiety or if they're in a state of fear, anger, also impact the way that you're going to connect and relate to one another. And unfortunately, what happens is that we've put such a huge stigma, a mark of disgrace and shame on the idea that there is mental illness within our communities. Even if it's anxiety or depression, doesn't mean that we're talking the more serious states of schizophrenia or bipolar or personality disorders. But any way we look at it, we begin to kind of label and stereotype. And so we don't think about the fact that in many of our relationships, we are experiencing some mental illness from time to time because it doesn't have to go throughout the lifetime. It could impact just a period of time. So I think it's important that we think about it from that perspective.
Okay, okay, and I'm glad you broke that down because you're right. We don't want to we don't talk about it because all we know is, especially those of us who are not educated in this, all we know is
Mhm.
is you're either crazy or you're not. And when we see people struggling with it, we say, "Oh, they're
Mhm.
crazy," and
Mhm.
and nobody wants to be labeled as crazy. So
Mhm.
we shy away from it. We don't talk about it, or if we are experiencing mental illness,
Mhm.
we don't want to be. And that doesn't always mean that you're, like you're saying, that doesn't mean that you're always crazy because you are going through something. But we have just labeled it, oh, if you're going through something, you crazy or you weak or whatever. and that's what's hurting
And
us.
the challenge, right? And that's the challenge, because the truth of the matter is that since the pandemic, let me say this, before the pandemic, we knew that one in five people are living with a mental illness, a diagnosed mental illness in the course of a 12-month period. After the pandemic, we all recognize that those numbers have shot up or just weren't being diagnosed before, right? So now we're looking at 1 in 4 rather than 1 in 5. And for serious, and so for the 1 in 5, we're talking again, anxiety, depression. So imagine anxiety simply being in the middle of a conflict. You're feeling as though you can't gain access to the words you want to speak. You might not be able to swallow. You're feeling like you want to run, you want to fight or flight kicks in at a higher level than what we see as sort of a baseline of anxiety. That might be, fear of speaking in public type thing. And then 1 in 20 to 1 in 25 really experience the serious side. And when we look at that from the perspective of the Black community, let me just break this down real quick.
Yep.
There's 13.2% of the US population that is us, African Americans, people of color, right? 16% of us have a diagnosed mental illness. 16%. So that's approximately 7 million African American people. But the fact of the matter is that it exists. And if we don't do anything about just acknowledging it first, we put ourselves at a disadvantage.
Wow. 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 All I can say is wow. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Okay. How do, okay, my first official question is how do different, how different is the cultural background impact people's relationship? Because just like for instance, I listened to a podcast and it's like it's a counselor, but it's like they talk about relationships and stuff like that. But it's it's a white person, and white person. I like his stuff. I listen to his stuff. But when he's giving marriage advice and all that, and kind of the examples that he's given and the scenarios that he's given, I'm thinking to myself, I mean, this is good advice, but it doesn't happen like that in our relationships. Like what he's saying from a clinical or a institutional perspective is correct, but the context is hard to wrap my mind around, because I'm like, we don't do that in our relationships. So and so that's when I really started realizing, okay, it must be a difference between other people's intimacy and relationships and the Black. So what is the different cultural background between with the Black with Black intimacy and mental health?
Well, first, let me say that we're not monolithic, right? We as African Americans don't all do things in the exact same way. And at the same time, there are veins of truths that we have written within ourselves as scripts for how we function and operate. There's also the hierarchy that sure exists in other cultures, but within ours, we pushed aside oftentimes some of the critical conversations that we needed to be having. So there was trauma that existed from beatings, just call them what they were, right? There's trauma that existed from molestations and incest that existed within the family generation after generation after generation. There's trauma that existed that got just pushed under the rug just from people saying things like, you'll never be nothing, you ain't gonna do nothing, you're just like your daddy, you're just like your mama. And we have to recognize that oftentimes we say these things to one another without understanding the impact it has on the mind, the spirit, and the soul, and the body of the individual we're talking to. So when I hear from clients who go into counseling with my Caucasian counterparts, that they just don't feel like they understand them. They don't hear them. It's mainly because there are many things that honestly, we weren't really taught how to handle finances. We weren't taught how to communicate effectively, which is why when you hear him say, well, first you ask the question, and then you're thinking, when I'm having this conversation, I'm clapping my hands, we're swinging our head, we're telling everybody what we really feel and think from a deep guttural perspective. Nobody's sitting saying, well, darling, let's have a deeper conversation about this. So we're more passionate, use every part of our beings to express ourselves. And for some people, that seems angry and it seems dysfunctional, but it's just who we are. So, because I said earlier, we're not a monolith, right? So if I grew up in a space that was more affluent and maybe in a white part of town, suburban maybe, and my partner grew up in a more inner city part of town and they were more urban than I am in my suburban space, we're going to find ourselves in a bit of conflict. I remember one time in a previous relationship using the words poverty mentality. And in my space where I grew up, that would trigger people to go, show me where. How did I do that? What did I say? But what it did for my partner was, you're saying that I'm a poor person. No, 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 no. I'm saying we have to think on a higher level, culturally and subculturally within the culture, right? Has a tremendous impact on how we now connect with one another because ego gets involved, pride gets involved. And rather than being able to say, let's pull back and understand what we're saying to one another, we're now angry.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned you mentioned the scripts that we have, and I know you talk about that in your book. Um,
Hmm.
I read your book, and you talk about the scripts that we're running and that we're living out, and
Hmm.
we're not even aware of it. I'm running a script, and I'm not even aware of it. And
Hmm.
these scripts that we have are getting in the way of our what true intimacy. So, what are some of
Hmm.
the? Let's talk about some of the obstacles that we face when we're trying to have
Mm.
intimacy. And what are some of the obstacles that we face?
Yeah. I think the two biggest ones are communication and expectations. And they go hand in hand, of course, because you have to communicate what your expectations are, right? And so in communication, what happens is over the course of time, we may start out being very loving and kind and really seeing one another through rose-colored glasses because there's that new feeling of connectedness and love and appreciation, and you make me feel safe, and ooh, I get gooey every time I see you. And then somewhere along the road, someone does or says something that ends up being critical, or maybe it puts you in defensive mode, or you find yourself actually being in contempt and resentment. And that usually comes because the communication that is expressed has not been discussed in terms of what the expectations are for how you talk to me. I don't like it when you raise your voice. I really need you to speak softer. Well, this is just how I talk. I come from a family where we just talk loud, and I can appreciate that that's how you and your family communicate. It doesn't make me feel good. Having the ability to say that and to actually feel heard in that moment and to have someone respond in a way that allows you to now change the pattern that you're going to write in the new script is powerful. Communication and expectations. Unexpressed expectations lead to resentment. I don't know what you want me to know. So we have to tell one another what we need because that's how true intimacy comes into play.
Okay. So, okay, well, let's define it. Let's define
Hmm.
true intimacy because I think, I know myself, for a long time, I didn't know what it was. I believe I know now,
Hmm.
but,
Hmm.
from growth and maturity, but, I
Hmm.
certainly didn't grow up that way. And, because I had my own script, like you talk about in the book, and how, uh, the males, they get their scripts from, or they learn from the males in their life, and when the females learn from males and
Hmm.
females. I don't want to give away the book,
Hmm.
but but um yeah, so I know,
Yeah.
I had my script and the way I seen things, and I thought intimacy was sex. And so
Mm.
what is true intimacy?
Yeah. Well, let's start with this. So there are four types of intimacy, and this is what we miss out on. There's the cognitive, which is that ability to have the conversations about your history, about your hopes, your dreams, and desires, such that you're able to determine whether or not you're on the same page. Now, same page means within a few lines of each other. Because if I'm at the top of the page and my partner's at the bottom of the page, somebody's going to be ready to flip the page. But if we're within a few lines of each other, we can wait, right? Emotional intimacy is that ability to feel safe enough to express my most vulnerable moments and not feel judged, not feel like you're going to make fun of me or criticize me or laugh at me for that, right? Spiritual intimacy encases all of them. Spiritual intimacy is that ability to really look at what creates the foundational core beliefs and values of each individual and how do those mesh to create the couple. And once that happens, by the time you get to physical intimacy, baby, now we're talking about truly good sex, right? We're not talking about this stuff that everybody thinks they're doing, but it's the opportunity to learn one another, to be able to understand what makes you tick, what makes you moan, what makes you feel great. And at the same time, be able to say, oh, wait, that's not the spot. Because all this pounding and all that kind of, nobody's doing anything with that. When you truly get to understand the cognitive, the emotional, this is what intimacy becomes before you even get to the physical. It is the ability to look beyond what you think you see on the outer physicality. It is being able to be so authentic that you show up, social observations and exchange of information, so that you now are being intentional about the reciprocity that you give through those unique expressions that only come for those two people who take the time to cultivate that. That's what real intimacy is.
If you're thinking about breaking into the tech field, then you should enroll in Course Careers. Our economy has changed, and so has the way we start careers. Course Careers is an online platform that will help you start your career faster without wasting money on college. With the Course Careers program, you can enroll into their online self-paced courses to begin, and you can complete the course in as little as a few weeks. And you don't have to worry about having the time to finish because all the courses are self-paced. You'll learn everything that's required to land your first job in tech sales, digital marketing, or information technology. The people at Course Careers partner directly with companies that want to hire you when you finish the program. People that finish the program are making $60,000 a year working from home. One person was able to finish the course within 2 weeks, and before they can even apply to any companies, their dream company reached out to them and set up an interview. They offered them over $100,000 a year starting in a fully remote position, and they didn't have any previous experience. If you want to get into the tech field, then go to my website, theladavis.com, to enroll today. And just for my listeners of this show, you can get a $50 discount when you use the coupon code LA50. That's LA50. Just go to theladavis.com/career, and you can also find that link in the show description. Course Careers is the quickest and most affordable way to change or start a career. Even though people may not know how to define all that and say all that, is it
Mhm.
is that what they're looking for, but they just don't know how to say it?
It is. It is. It's the looking for a level of safety and love and belonging such that they feel esteem.
Yeah.
So it's important that those provider skills exist, but it's also important that you're able to know one another so deeply that you understand that when your partner tells you that they really love something, like something, or don't, that that is a truth for who they are, and that you take it in such that it now becomes a part of how you express your love toward them.
Yeah, and see that, and this is so important because what you just said, we don't know how to say that. Even though our bodies yearn for that, we don't know how to say that. And I think women try to say that to men, but they don't know how to say it, so they are, they're requiring something that they don't know how to communicate, and it just comes out in anger, and you don't never do this for me or whatever. And but that's basically, that's not really what she's saying, and but she don't know how to say it like you just said it, and that's the problem, because now we're fighting because she didn't know how to say that, or even the guy, he doesn't even know that his body requires that. And he definitely doesn't know how to say that. And so now we're fighting because we both need those levels of intimacy, the cognitive, emotional, all of that, but we don't even know how to say it. So we got this riff, and we don't even know what it's about.
And that's why it's important to get the book, because I do a lot of case study in the book too, where I talk about the ways in which these levels and types of intimacy play out. We were only born with 6 emotions. And intimacy comes out of what you feel, right? You're not going to want to be intimate with someone that you have no feeling for. They don't make you happy. They're not, they don't bring joy to your life. They aren't kind to you. But we're only born with 6 emotions. So that's fear, surprise, disgust, anger, and sadness and happiness. 6 emotions. We have to be taught all the others that go with it. So if you didn't grow up in a space, in a household that understood the difference between disappointment and anger, then you're just going to see it as always angry. So you won't understand how to express the expectation that you would be able to listen to me without judgment. Now, understanding that likely one of the things you heard on the podcast that you spoke of earlier is how to communicate. And one of the ways that you do that is to listen with the purpose of understanding before you get to the place of responding. We haven't always been heard. And so we feel like we need to get our point across. And when you walk into relationship with that perspective, it transforms just the way you live your life overall.
Wow. Yeah. And the reason, and this stuff is so important because we're talking about generational changes, because here's the thing, if we can get this right, it has a generational effect, because the reason, the things that we do now, like you talk about, is it's passed down, and it's passed
it's
down.
Learned behavior.
Yeah. And like you said, even going back to slavery, that had a huge impact on, and I don't even think people realize that part. We realize that slavery had an impact on us as far as economic things, economic. We understand that, and we will use that, anytime. Because of this happening, that's why I can't get ahead, and we understand that part. But like I said, I never really made the correlation between that and what we experience now in our intimacy, in our love lives, in our relationships. And so that's why this is so important, because if we can get this right, it can start affecting our children, because everything that we're learning, it was, the reason why my parents were I love my parents, they're great parents, but I can't say that, what I learned was, I can't say I learned all the right things, either because they didn't talk about it, they didn't know how to talk about it, and not necessarily saying it was their fault, but they didn't know what they didn't know.
They didn't know, right? Yeah, it's why a number of the Generation Z and millennials, and some late end Xers are going through what we call reparenting, where they learn how to unlearn those mm, skills that their parents taught them. And so when I think about one of the projects that I work on with children is social emotional learning. We did not get that social emotional learning coming up through our households, in most households. Again, we're not monolithic, so I can't speak for every household. That would be too absolute to do. But that social emotional learning is the ability for us to be able to have self awareness and self control. And if you think about it, during slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights, we didn't have self control. We were being controlled by someone other, right? Those interpersonal skills that allow us to be able to connect with others, to be able to relate with others outside of those negative emotions of being fearful, being angry that we have been harmed or that we are being minimized and dismissed and diminished in ability, being disgusted with the society that we see today that is not elevating us as we know we should be, and all within our own communities, oftentimes. So, if we look at our own cultural conditioning from what we do to ourselves as a result of the impact of what's coming at us, we don't sit in the space where we're self aware. The only way to be strategic is to get that emotional stability, understand emotional regulation at a level where you can pay enough attention to what's happening for you and those around you, and either remove yourself from certain spaces or figure out how to get around the traps that are set. And when you do that as a couple, my God, how powerful it is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man, we don't even have enough time to talk about all this stuff because it's
I know.
yeah, yeah. Because I want to challenge my brothers. Um,
Mm,
I want to challenge my brothers because this is so important to that my brothers get this. And I'm not saying that women automatically got it, but a
mm,
lot of times that is the case. That is the case.
mm,
Even if women don't know how to use the words, they got it on
mm-hmm,
some level most of the time.
mm-hmm.
Um, but I just want to challenge our men and our brothers because we definitely need to lead the way, and and learning these skills because these are skills that need to be learned. The social skills, emotional skills, these are
Mm-hmm.
skills that need to be learned.
And these things that keep falling apart around you, at some point you have to stop, because if you don't, you're just going to take those problems into the next relationship and into the next relationship and into the workforce and into your friendships. And those people who can't tell you anything, right? Your friends who can't, oh, you can never tell him he's wrong, or you can never tell her that she's, then you have to think about that. Why can't they be honest enough with you such that you can make the changes and adjustments you need to so you can live your best life? Truly living your best life is not about the money you can throw at it, because the greatest generational wealth we can bestow is emotional and mental wellness. Without it, you will spend the money on frivolous things. You will spend all that money out in shopping because you got to have some shopping therapy. You will spend that money buying the latest cars and the latest shoes, but you are not mentally and emotionally well. You're dysregulated, and your behaviors demonstrate that.
Yeah, wow, man, this is so good. Hey, man, this is so good. So, let's like I said, we don't have enough time to talk about this, that all of this stuff. That's why you all need to connect with Dr. Jeannelle. You need to get the book. And fellas, get the book. Because if you learn this stuff, you learn what Dr. Jeannelle is talking about, you can get the HBNS. You need to get the book to see what I'm talking about. Trust me, fellas,
That's good.
get the book And you trust me, you will want to get this book and so you can figure out how to get HPNS. Okay, but anyway, Dr. Jeannelle, this has been so good. It's been really informative. This is such a important conversation that we have. We can't talk about this stuff enough. People need to be educated. They need to learn. And so just any last things you want to say, and then just tell us how we can connect with you and how can we get the book.
Absolutely. I think that the most important thing I can say is we have been survivors, and now it's time for us to truly thrive. And so, Into Me See, Mastering Black Intimacy for the Relationship You've Always Wanted, can be found on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And you can reach me at tmicounselingandcoaching.com. That's my practice, my private practice, tmicounselingandcoaching.com. And on Instagram, I am Dr. Jeannelle, Jeannelle, DrJeannelle. And then on TikTok, I'm Dr. Jeannelle dot, oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, Dr. Jeannelle, Jeannelle, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. So those are the ways in which you can get me.
Okay, and I'll try to link to those in the show notes, in the show description as well. And let me just say this one more thing about the book. You all, this book is, I know some people may not be big readers because, but this book is easy to read. It's easy to read. This book has an interesting mixture of things that you don't find together all the time. Sometimes you find a book that's so intellectual and have so many big words that it puts you to sleep. And then on the opposite end, you might have a book that just doesn't keep you engaged. It may have, it may be interesting, but there's no solid, weightiness to it. This book has a combination of that, all of that. Dr. Jeannelle is speaking like real in this book, but it's also intellectual. Like it's a mix, like it's a good book. And it's one of the best books that I've read because it gives you that realness as well as intellectual and all of that, and easy to read, all in one book. So you normally don't see that combination in a book. So I just wanted to say that. So get the book, Into Me See, Mastering Black Intimacy for the relationship you've always wanted. So Dr. Jeannelle, thank you for coming on the show. This has been so much fun. It's been informative. And I just hope and pray that everyone got a lot out of it. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You take care.
All right. Hey, I hope everyone enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Jeannelle. That's it. That's all I got for this episode. If you like it, please rate it, leave a review, share it with somebody who you know will benefit from it. And trust me, definitely everybody can benefit from this. So please share it, let someone know about it. And don't forget to subscribe, and so you can get the updated episodes when they get released. That's it. That's all I've got. Thank you for watching and listening. And remember, let's win in life. And to do that, you got to keep a growth state of mind.